Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us here this evening for Earth Ministries, Washington Interfaith Power and Light, our 2025 legislative preview, and our a little bit of training around what we do in terms of the legislative cycle and session. So, my name is Reverend A.C. Churchill. My pronouns are they, them. I am the executive director at Earth Ministry, Washington Interfaith Power and Light, and I am currently calling from my home, which is on the traditional lands of the Puyallup people in Tacoma. And I'm excited to be with you all this evening for our session. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you so that we can get into this important work together. I also want to say, as we are starting, there we go. As we're starting, I want to acknowledge that you have chosen to be with us this evening, and I'm so grateful for that. We are so grateful for that. You could have been many places, and you chose to be here on a Monday evening. So I'm not sure what your life is looking like, but we're grateful that you're here with us. So at Earth Ministry, Washington Interfaith Power and Light, which we shorten to Earth Ministry Washington IPL, our mission is to transform faith and conscience into action for the well-being of communities and the environment. Some of you may know who we are, some of you may not. So we're going to be doing some of these, may be new to some of you, even if you participated in some of our briefings before. So who are we? Who is this Earth Ministry Washington IPL thing? So we are individuals, individual people. We are sacred communities that have gathered together, who are green teams, who are people we're people of faith and religious traditions, spiritual traditions. We're people of conscience. So it really, if you are a person or you know someone who is connected to caring for the earth and doing things that have meaning and value, we want to work with you. We want to do this work together. We are committed to environmental justice for all who call Washington home. And we are connected to a larger network through National Interfaith Power and Light that connects to the work across the United States. And we tend to focus the majority of our work within Washington. We also focus the environmental issues that we work on three kind of main areas, which are water, health, and energy. We won't be talking much about those this evening. And so if you happen to be interested, maybe you've worked with us before and those seem new to you, maybe you're new to us and you're not sure what they mean, don't worry, more information is coming out about those focus areas and how they influence our work. But we will not spend much time on those buckets, diving into those buckets tonight. One of the things that's really important for us is our land acknowledgement. This is part of the way that we do our environmental justice work in the work that we're embodying our justice work. So Earth Ministry Washington IPL works within the unceded territories of the Northwest Native Nations. Our office is on the traditional land of the first people of Seattle, the Duwamish people, past and present. Land acknowledgement is one way to resist erasure of Indigenous histories, as well as to honor tribes in the land itself. And we acknowledge that land acknowledgement is only simply one way that we do this. We participate in several tribal-led campaigns and initiatives, as well as we are located in Seattle. As an organization, we also pay real rent to the Duwamish. So if you're interested in that or interested in other things, let me know. Let's talk. So here's our agenda for tonight. We're going to do a brief. I'm talking brief. Advocacy refresher. Not sure who all's out there. Maybe if you have a moment, put in the chat, how long have you been doing advocacy work? Are you new to it? Is this 5 years, 10 years? Are you just starting out? Did somebody submit your email to this training and you don't know why you're here, whatever your reason, we want to do a quick refresher to make sure that we're talking about the same things, that we all understand what we're talking about. So then we're going to go through our 2025 legislative cycle and talk to you about the 4 priorities that we have. We're going to do some tools, tips, and practice. And then we're going to talk about building a movement. And through all of this, I just want to pause and say, there's a lot coming at us. There's a lot that we have to do. There's a lot of, this environmental work is really, it's a lot of work. It's a big lift, but we do it together. You're not alone. We do this in community. And so it's okay to pause and breathe if you're feeling a little bit like this is a lot. So what even is advocacy, and why is it important? Why are we talking to churches? Why are we talking to synagogues? Why are we talking to gatherings and friend circles and Buddhist communities? Like why is it important for like people like us? I mean, so first, it's just important to know advocacy is simply a community organizing tool that can be used to create change at systems levels. There are lots of community organizing tools that can be used. Things like planting a garden, gathering people, having people gather in and create a pea patch at your local sacred community, or, gathering food for a food bank. There are lots of different ways that we organize communities. Advocacy just happens to be one tool, and it's used specifically to create systems change. Advocacy is a tool that's used to speak up and influence political, economic, and social institutions. And it's not just so we don't just advocate legislatively in terms of like our Washington State Legislature, but if you are part of a sacred tradition that has a governing body, you could advocate at the governing body for more environmental just practices. I know I've seen a number of United Methodists on the call tonight and Episcopalians who are doing this like divest work, who are doing this creation care work throughout your own tradition. And so that's advocating as well. It doesn't just have to be at the legislature. Advocacy also addresses the root causes of issues through public policy. Because at the base of it is the issue that we're trying to address, right? Whether it's pollution or lack of access to clean water and clean air. Advocacy is a tool that we use to address an issue, much like planting a garden to create sustainable food sources and healthy and abundant and affordable food sources. So what's faith-rooted advocacy? Well, faith-rooted advocacy takes those basic premises, those kind of structures of advocacy, but speaks up from it from a different perspective. So it speaks up using one's own values or spiritual tradition as your why. Now, for those of you who might be new to this work, that's kind of the silly thing of what I just did, is I asked you to put in the chat about how long you've been doing this work. I can't see the chat. I don't know what y'all put, but I trust that y'all put something, or at least 1 or 2 of you did. But for those of you who maybe are new to this, or new to Earth Ministry, Washington IPL, one of the things that we talk about a lot is your why. Figuring out your why you're doing this, your motivation, your reasoning. So understand the why, but for people from faith-rooted, sacred traditions, conscience-led decisions, we use our why to inform us and motivate us to speak up for our values through policy change. It's also vision-focused. It's co-creating a just, healthy, and sustainable future for all. And I think this is one of the kind of the bigger pieces that doesn't often get talked about, is it doesn't center the W. And what I mean by that is the win at all costs. So a lot of campaigns and a lot of organizing often will prioritize or move through to a mindset of the ends justify the means, which, we are dealing with a world of hurt and pain. And so it can be understandable why we might want to try to get a policy passed or a campaign won at any cost. However, kind of work that we do at Earth Ministry Washington IPL says the means are the end. How we go about the campaign, how we do the advocacy, and create community, that's what type of world we are creating. If we're willing to sacrifice people along the way, if we're willing to sacrifice planet along the way just to get that win, then we're still participating in systems that create harm. And so while we do work to try to achieve our goals, it's not a going for the W at all costs. So we have some unique roles within the faith community. And we kind of talked about these just a minute ago, about heart-centered, values-led. I think the one thing that I want to say, I'm going to actually go back in slides, is, actually, no, I won't. We'll keep going forward. Welcome to an extrovert's brain, y'all. Is there are some strengths that we bring to this work as people coming from, as conscience-led folks, coming from faith traditions or sacred traditions or religious traditions, that there are strengths that we have to help change hearts and minds and policies that we get to help lead in this work. And those in particular are that we speak to people's hearts and minds through our stories and through things like hope and grief. We're not afraid to look at the grief, or, in my sacred tradition, we would call it lament. We're not afraid to look at those things, and we also have the courage to imagine that there's another future possible. Those are things that any movement, and especially the environmental justice movement, need in order to continue moving toward these very ambitious goals. So again, from my faith tradition, and if it doesn't fit, please don't, you don't have to claim it. But in my faith tradition, I would say, beloveds, we are needed. We are needed in this work. So that gets to stories. And this has kind of been a big chunk. And so in just a second, we're going to pause. So the story of you, the story of us, the story of now. So the question that I have for you is, what is your story? Why do you care about our earth, our community? So it's an invitation for you to think about it. I also want to provide a resource, which is, we have Earth Ministry, Washington IPL has a worksheet that helps walk you through these steps to figure out what your story is, because you may already know your story. You may already know why you care about the earth. You also may be looking at this and say, I don't even know what that means. What do you mean, what's my story? I'm just here trying to help pass policy. There's a reason why we talk about stories being important. Because when I share with you my why, when I say I am a parent who is concerned about the future and what kind of future my child will have, and I want to leave a legacy, I want to be part of something that makes a difference in this world. When I tell that story to a policymaker, there's more of a chance that will make an impact especially when it is coupled and partnered with science and data and facts that go along with the important parts of policy making. So I'm not going to ask you to share your story in the chat, unless you get a stroke of inspiration, you'd like to. But I'd like you to take this question with you tonight and think about it. What's your story? Why do you care about our Earth? And if you don't know and you need some help, just send me an email and we can send you out the worksheet. And I'll probably include it in on the follow-up as the recording anyway. So I'm going to stop my share for just a second because I want to check in and see, I see lots of things happening in the chat. Do we have any questions so far? Is this making sense? If you have a question, maybe raise your hand. Do the little raise your hand chat or unmute yourself. And it's okay if you don't have questions either. I just realized I've been coming at you quite fast and quite energetic. So want to slow it down for those of you who think you maybe need some time to process. Elizabeth, yes.
Hi there. I'm asking if you coordinate your work in any way with Faith Action Network.
Great question. Yes, we do. And I saw a couple, I saw Elizabeth join us from Elizabeth Dickinson's on here from Faith Action Network. And there might be a couple more. I know we had a couple more potentially being able to join us. But yes, we work with Faith Action Network and primarily connected through the environmental work that we do collectively. Great question, Elizabeth. Amazing. Okay, if you have other questions, you can put them in the chat, or we can try to figure them out later. Awesome. Okay, let's keep going. So our legislative cycle. So there are a couple things to know about. The priority bills that we pick. So we're going to do the tips and tools and practice after this, but the couple things to know is, one is that we work with a variety of environmental coalitions. We do not have a lobbyist on staff, and so we are so grateful to be in partnership and rely on our partnerships with a lot of other organizations to help create the policies. So the policies that you will see in just a minute are ones that we have been part of working with other coalitions on, but we weren't the source of the policy. We didn't create the policy itself, but we're certainly as members of these coalitions certainly endorsing them and lifting them up as priorities for us. Another thing to know about our priorities is we want to live into our values of justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. And so you'll see that the priorities that we lift up are ones that are also trying to center in justice work and helping to reduce harms and create healthier systems for all of Washingtonians, especially those who live in overburdened, heavily impacted communities. So here is our first one for the 2025 legislative cycle. So our first one is the CURB Act. This is the second year this is coming into play. It is the Cumulative Risk Burden Act. It is sponsored by Front and Centered, and I apologize, I do not have bill numbers up there yet, but they will be added to the slide deck when the slide deck gets sent out, excuse me. But the Cumulative Risk Burden Act requires that anything that's going to pollute or affect the health especially the health of already overburdened communities, be monitored and addressed. So one of the primary ways that it does this is through permitting. And you'll see here in the third point that it requires a lead agency, which is the Department of Ecology, would be to deny permit applications for new facilities that add, so that increase pollution, and additionally work with applicants who are seeking permit renewals to add, to mitigate or to change their permitting their plan if it with the goal to reduce pollution over time. So the goal with this is that the Department of Ecology would either deny a permit that would increase pollution in areas that are already first prioritizing areas that are already overburdened with pollution, or they can either deny or mitigate permits. One of the things that that has been a challenge, and we're trying to identify the kind of piece around it, is the permit renewal piece of it. So right now, the priority with this bill is that it focus on new permits, but permits that are already in place, we're still trying to kind of find the mechanism for addressing permit renewals. Another way to look at this is this is an enforcement mechanism that was put into place for Washington's HEAL Act, which was passed in 2021. The HEAL Act, Healthy Environments for All Act, did a lot of amazing things, including creating a health disparities map across Washington State, which you can find, and I'll make sure to include in the links that get sent out after our session. And the health disparities map, what that's done is provide information and data so that Department of Ecology and other agencies and nonprofits and NGOs can show that there are communities across Washington State that are being disproportionately affected by pollution. And so this particular act would require the monitoring and would require denial of applications and permits. So, like I said, this is being sponsored by Front and Centered. For those who don't know, Front and Centered is a BIPOC-led environmental justice organization working across Washington State. The next is the Recycling Reform Act. Come on, y'all, whoever is in the chat or whoever's been there with us for the past couple of years, this is the RAP Act, RAP Act, brought back again, Recycling Reform Act. Third time is a charm. We've got to do this, y'all. So this is the third time this bill has been brought forward, and it would require that manufacturers pay fees that pay for the upgrades to recycling systems and remove the cost burden from residents. Additionally, it would add higher fees would be charged on manufacturers who produce excess packaging and packaging that is not easily recyclable or usable. It is and would include in a portion of free recycling for all Washington residents. This is one of the EPC, Environmental Priority Coalition, one of the priority bills, and is EPC, for those who don't know, is is a network, a coalition of over 20 environmental nonprofits and organizations across the state, which we are one of them, and works and is led, facilitated by the Washington Conservation Action. So the REWRAP Act has been rewrapped into another form and it doesn't have a catchy name this time, but the nope, I'm not going to try that. Okay, so the Recycling Reform Act. Hopefully this time we can move it through. So the first two we talked about really were about advancing, right? Advancing ways to reduce, and these next two are as well, but the last two, advancing ways to reduce pollution, advancing systems that, decrease the amounts of waste that we have, and the packaging and the consumption products that we have, as well as making recycling accessible and affordable. These next two priority bills are more about protecting and defending. So the first is protect, advance clean trucks and climate progress. So in 2021, Washington passed the Advanced Clean Trucks rules, which was a zero emission vehicle sales requirement for medium and heavy duty vehicles that ramped up over time. And this rule comes into effect for model year 2025 vehicles. However, well, in part, the reason that we are able to move through the Act rules is due to California having higher emission standards than the federal government. And so states are allowed to choose, at this particular point in time, choose which vehicle standards they follow, as long as they're following the kind of the most strenuous. So this particular bill, part of what we are seeing is that there are going to be attempts to try to either repeal the Act rules or delay its implementation. And so this is also another priority bill for the Environmental Priorities Coalition, and was one of ours as well. And it is all about trying to encourage and move legislators along to say, no, we need to move forward on this. It has been passed. It is time. It is time to keep moving forward on reducing the amount of pollution that especially from heavy and medium duty vehicles that affect our airways, our waterways, especially with the amounts that transportation is one of the highest emitters within our state. So the last one that we will be focusing on this year is the, you see, Climate Commitment Act is the Invest in Climate Action. So this is, again, another priority bill that will be trying to defend and protect. So before you'll see you can go ahead and read through these pieces. One of the things to note is that our combined efforts were so strong in defeating ballot initiative 2117. So just a moment to share some joy and some celebration around our collective efforts, because the margin of 68 to 32 was the victory and the winning of us defeating that ballot initiative and keeping the CCA intact is amazing. And now we have a point when our legislature is going into session and it faces a multi-billion-dollar shortfall in the state's general funding and transportation funding revenue streams. So the major part of this Invest in Climate Action bill is protecting CCA funding, because we don't want those funds that we just, as a state, said, no, we need these in order to do these just energy, just transition projects across the state, that they get reallocated into the general fund. So this priority bill proposal supports smart and responsible climate investments and to defend the CCA from misuse and to ensure its use to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, invest in natural climate solutions, and prioritize frontline communities, especially recognizing that that the percentages that were in the CCA of supporting frontline communities, those goals of 30%, 10% for tribal-led, 10 to 15% for tribal-led, and 30 to 40 for frontline communities have not been met yet, with even with the first couple rounds of funds coming in. So we still have a lot of work to do to ensure that frontline communities are actually receiving the funding that the CCA committed that it would be. So our work here will be to invest or to protect these funds so that we can continue moving forward. So with that, I'm going to pause again my share just to see, are there questions? I see some.
Yes, I have a
Yes,
question.
Okay.
Mary Ellen. So
Mary Ellen, yes.
my understanding of this, and I might be wrong, so I thought that the issue with regard to the Climate Commitment Act and misusing the funds, that's a budgetary issue. So how are you trying to write legislation that's going to keep them from using those funds for the budget?
Yeah, I think the policy itself will be a policy to write in kind of rules around how the funding gets used.
And those weren't in the original bill?
I think there's probably enough interpretation in them that there's concern that they could be moved to other places.
Oh, okay.
So we just want to make sure that, I mean, part of the work there is to really just make sure that it is clear where those funds go.
But is there somebody working on that? Because that hasn't come up in the pre-filed bills.
Yeah, so
seen.
Oh, I apologize. I didn't mention who that's from. That's also the Environmental Priorities Coalition and Washington
But that's not, but I haven't seen, what I'm saying is I haven't seen any bill come in through the pre-filing of how
Yeah,
this.
I haven't seen the number come in yet, but I will. Thank you for that. I will I'll make sure that in our next meeting that we'll get that bill. We've got a little bit more time.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Mary Ellen. Always ask such good questions. Carolyn, I see your hand.
Well, not a good question, but it's legislative question 101.
Okay.
I think we're in a short legislative system. Am I right? Session?
Good question. We're going to get to that next. And the answer is nope, it's flipped. This is our long one. We're getting ready to go into a 105-day session.
Thank you.
Of course. Elizabeth.
Please clarify for me what a frontline community is. Thank you.
Of course. What a great question. So I think a frontline community would be considered communities that traditionally are more racially diverse, more economically diverse, so tend to be Black, Brown, Indigenous communities, but I would also say that there are communities like poor or white communities in certain parts of the state that are also part of what a frontline, and so those are the demographics of what make up a frontline communities. Frontline communities are, in terms of environmental justice work, frontline communities are communities that experience the impacts of environmental justice first and foremost. So they are the ones who oftentimes live by ports, oftentimes live in areas that get what we call considered sacrifice zones. So they don't have as many air quality protections or water protections, so they are experiencing the impacts. We could also call those who are experiencing or those who are housing insecure or homeless part of frontline communities because they are experiencing the effects and the impacts of climate change first. And the effects of pollution and all the harms of environmental degradation first.
Thank you.
Of course. And if there's somebody else who has an additional answer on that you can feel free to put it in the chat. Are there other questions? Okay, I think to add on to that, we just want to note that for Earth Ministry Washington IPL, we want to work for kind of the health and sustainability of all of Washington. For all those who call Washington home, whether they be creaturely or humanly or, air or water. However, we do know that there are communities that have been harmed at greater levels than other communities. And so we want to work to in terms of our advocating, or in terms of our policy advocating, is work to advocate for policies that go where the need is, where there is at higher levels, to help reduce those down, so that we can begin to work in equitable ways. Marilyn?
Hi, I'm Marilyn Cornwell. I'm a former board member, and I just have to say that one of the things that Earth Ministry does well is actually not just work with frontline communities, but actually listens and listens and partners, walks alongside, so that their voices are the voices that speak first. And that's, I want to say, as part of the strategic plan, that's something that is highly valued.
Thank you, Marilyn. Elizabeth, I see your hand again.
Sorry, lots of questions.
That's okay.
I'm curious about the impact on animals and the legislation we've talked about so far. What are we talking about? Wolves, the wolf issue, and issues with the orcas, et cetera, salmon. Is that an indirect, or can you clarify what the relationship would be with
Sure.
animal protection, animal welfare groups, et cetera? Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much. I think when we're looking at the policies that we're lifting up right now, they could feel like that there's not a correlation. There is. So I appreciate you asking for me naming that explicitly. So one of the things we do know is that pollution, especially emissions from cars and tire runoff, and those pollutants don't just stay on the roadways. They go into the air. They go into the air. They get in the water. They impact the ecosystems, not in the waterways. And so it's not just the water of people who are drinking, but the creatures and the life forms and the life sources that are in the waterways and that are in the air. And so part of the work in terms of the pollution focused ones would be to reduce the impacts of all communities on to reduce the toxins and the impacts on them. The Reform Recycling Act has a similar kind of focus, kind of indirect connection of reducing the amount of materials that are getting into our landfills, our water, our streams, our waterways, our watersheds, out into lands that can't be recycled, that are full of harmful materials, not only to us but to animals. I think the biggest one that feels like it's connected directly to your question, though, is the one around the CCA, because the Climate Commitment Act has in it huge amounts of funding set aside for river restoration work, for salmon restoration projects, for tribal-led initiatives across Washington State, for projects around forest, wildfire mitigation and reforestry, forestry work. I'm not sure about the wolves, but I know that that a lot of the CCA funds intrinsically have in their funding for salmon and orca recovery.
Is anyone addressing the impact of the wind turbines on bird death?
That's a good question. I'm not sure, but I can look it up and get back to you on that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Elizabeth. I'm also noticing our time, so Oh my goodness, so sorry. Hope you're feeling better. Noticing our time, so I'd like to keep moving us along, but great questions. Feel free to put more questions in the chat. Like I said, I don't know all the answers, but I'm happy to learn with you and learn together. Okay, so we've just got a couple more, and these next couple sections are really us moving through some tips and tools like we were just talking about. So first, just some basic information. So like Caroline already brought up, is this a long session? What does that even mean? Long session versus short session. So Washington State goes back and forth. It has a long session one year and a short session. Last year we were in the short, it was 60 days. It was quick. This year is a long session with 105 days. It starts next Monday. And the big thing to know about this year is it is a budget year, as you heard Mary Ellen talking about. And as you maybe saw in our budget priorities, there is a massive deficit. So a lot of the policies that contain what we call fiscal notes, or people are going to be asking for money to go along with it, they're going to have some challenges, which we know that our the recycling policy will have some, there will be some, conversations of cost, but there is confidence that we'll be able to move that one along, move it forward. So we're gonna pause here and actually take a minute to, I'm gonna stop this share, and we're gonna go to a different, screen, which is for those who are just starting out with us. The Washington State has a new legislative website, which is actually really helpful. The other one was okay, it was good, but it was a little challenging to navigate. And so there are a couple things that want to kind of point out here. So the very first thing that you need to do if you're not familiar with it is find out who your legislator is. So simply go in terms of Washington State's leg, which is here, leg.wa.gov. Again, I'll make sure to include this link and all the other ones in the email that gets sent out afterwards. So you'd go here to the district finder. Now you'd simply put in your address. And while I, let's see, we are going to put in the office. This is, I'll get to see me try to type. So this is our office address for Earth Ministry, Washington Interfaith Power and Light, WIBL. And so you can see here, one, if you didn't know where we are, we're located in the office in St. John United, right across from the Woodland Park Zoo. But you can see here, once you put in your address, it'll tell you your state district, the legislators, and also the congressional district. And so you'll use this to really guide your journey into, and there will be times when we will be asking you to reach out to a particular legislator, especially if you're ones, in districts where a legislator is someone who could really help move a bill along, or is one who is being a little bit challenging, and one who needs a little bit more support into moving them along. So this Find Your District is a really helpful tool. And once you find your district, then you can click on the individual that you want to know more about, and it will take you to that person's page, Representative Liz Berry. And then you can go to her website. You can also find out more contact information about her, or whichever your representative is that you're looking at. and you can find all the information about them, their contact, as well as their committee membership and voting records. So you see here that for our work here, Liz Berry is an important member of one of the major committees that we work with, which is the Energy or Environment and Energy Committee. If we keep going through, and I know I'm not gonna promise I won't ask you to figure out this labyrinth that I'm creating for y'all right now, is if you go through, you can click on whatever committee. We'll just show you here again. I clicked on Environment and Energy. And it tells you here, much like it did for each representative, up at the top bar, it shows you the calendar, the members and the staff. You can get updates about particular legislation. But this is not, like, well, let's go to calendar real quick. So there's no upcoming activity yet. The session hasn't started, but once it does, this will be active as much all the other calendars and sessions. So this is a really good place to start with your legislators. One of the other things is here, and again, I'll be sending you direct links, so you won't necessarily have to navigate through all of this. And if you are interested, we send out weekly legislative actions to do that will directly link to the action. Just also showing you how you can get there through here. So, so one of the ways that we talk to people about, or one of the ways that we encourage people and ask for support on moving bills through or stopping harmful legislation is to have people testify or comment on a bill. Now, testify sounds really intense. The first time I heard it, I was like, I don't know if I have all the words to say to know. The thing to know about testifying is that it really is kind of like a roll call. Is you get an option, an ability to, when that meeting is being, like, when that bill's up for discussion, you have the ability to sign in pro or con. I'm for it, I'm against it. And so that's one of the major ways that we'll be reaching out to you to say, hey, we need support in getting this bill forward. Can you please sign in pro for this? Can you please sign in con? Can you please share it with your community? So support, oppose, and each bill will have this this option to testify. So you can find a lot of additional information here about, I'll go back up, about how to track a bill, the data and statistics. There are several of our community members that do a fabulous job with the data and statistics. And so if you have any questions about that, we can, and I don't know the answers, we can certainly refer you to some of them, but there is a lot of helpful information in this website, and it is a lot more user-friendly than it has been in the past. So I'm going to go back to our slideshow. We are almost done. So there's some pieces here about, like, what is it at? So this is what we're talking about, like signing in pro. How does it happen? You'll go to the website and you'll find your bill, but more than this is an HB 2049. It was an example. More than this, we will make sure to include the direct link to the bill that we are asking you to support. And then for those who don't know, the way in which the Washington State Legislature works is that it has to go through this entire cycle here. So policy, if it has a fiscal, oh, yes, is there a question?
So sorry, but I think you said you were going to go back to your slides, and we're still looking at the legislature website.
That's good to know, because I've definitely gone back to my slides.
Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. I really appreciate that. Y'all, apparently technology is supposed to work for, we're working it together. Thanks, Laura. Okay, here we go. Last little bit. So think back real quick to how something becomes a bill, right? For those who may not know or may have forgotten, it has to go through all these steps. It's kind of like a dance. Like you got to go to the policy, and if it has money attached to it, to the fiscal, and then it's got to go to rules. Then it gets to the floor. And then if it gets voted on and passes the floor, it goes from one chamber to the next. So if it starts in the House, it has to go this whole process through the House and then get over to the Senate and then do the same whole process again before it even moves possibly towards the governor for review, potentially signing or vetoing. So oftentimes, and I'll have to check about our policy bills. I'm still waiting on coalition members to confirm. Oftentimes, policies will be in multiple houses at the same time to try to help move them forward in either one or the other. But know that it's a bit of a complicated process, but we'll be with you through it, so you're not having to try to figure it out on your own. Okay. The last thing that I want you to do is this. I would like you to take just a minute in this building a movement. I'm going to stop my screen share. I'd like you to take a minute. I'm going to put the Washington legislature, find your legislator. I'm going to put it in the chat. And I'd like you to take a minute to look up your legislator if you don't already know them. If you do know them, you could go on to step 2, which step 2 is putting them in your phone as a contact. If you should choose, or writing it down so that you have them close by. Like writing their numbers down so that you have their contact information down so that you have them close by. I don't know about you all, but I have my phone with me most of the time, and it's a lot easier for me just to hit call on a contact than it is to type in a number. So whether it's your own legislator or it is the hotline, and I'll put the hotline number in the chat as well. Whichever one it is, I want you to take just a minute. Here's the hotline number. Take just a minute to write these 2 things down or to put them in your phone so that you can be ready and prepared next week when the cycle starts. Okay. Last thing to let you know, I want to end on this is 2 things. One is we do this work together, and you do not have to be an expert on any of these policies, on any of the data, or on the impacts in order to speak to policymakers about them, because you're an expert on your own story, and that is what matters as we move into this session, is you being able to share your own story about why these things matter to you. And the last piece is that in my last piece of homework for you is for you to think about 5 people, up to 5 people. How about that? make it feel a little bit more doable. Up to 5 people that you would want to talk to about 1, 2, all of these policies throughout the cycle. So we've got 105 days. We don't do this work alone. We are going to be building this community as we go. And in order to do that, it can't just be me. It can't just be the staff of Earth Ministry Washington IPL. It can't just be us plus EPC plus FAN plus others. We do this together. And so we need your support in doing this work. So think about some people you would want to talk to about these policies and about why they matter to you. And know that there are a couple important events that are coming up that you'll get an opportunity to practice. The first one is the Eastern Washington Legislative Conference, which is on January 25th. So I don't know if we have any Eastern Washingtonians in the Zoom room tonight, but happening on Saturday, January 25th, at Spokane Valley. And in Spokane Valley, there will be an Eastern Washington Legislative Conference that we will be there, FAN will be there. There'll be a lot of other good community orgs and community members there. I'll have details for you about that later. And then FAN's Interfaith Advocacy Days, IFAD, it will be on February 20th. And Elizabeth, may I ask you to unmute and say, is there anything else you'd be wanting to add? Elizabeth Dickinson, if you're still on.
I'm
Sorry,
still
Elizabeth.
here. I mean, that was great, very generous. We do, I put something in the chat, but we are so grateful for Earth Ministry, Washington, Interfaith Power and Light to do this work. We do this work together and really appreciate that.
Thanks. Elizabeth, just real quick check. Is registration open for that yet?
We believe it will open by Friday.
Amazing. Okay, so once that goes out, FAN will send it out, we will send it out. And so we'll be excited to share that day and do some interfaith advocating together. We'll be there as well. So
Great. Thank you.
thank you all. Well, blessings to you all. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. If you had questions and they didn't get answered, I have lots of questions too, and so we can keep asking them together. But blessings, and I hope your rest of your evening is what you need it to be.